Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Deepen, and I am sitting across from Andy Littleton, who just paid me one of the most amazing compliments. Except you don't get to hear it till the end of the podcast.
you got to tune
listen to hear that again. And he commented on the fact that we have been doing this, I think, for 4 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, 4 years. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
Like we are coming up on, 200 episodes. We will hit that in the next year.
That's wild.
Or less. So if we keep going like we're going. But, we used to podcast every single week, and now we're probably average every 3 a month now.
Yeah. So, close to.
Yeah. So, but I have loved, just to say, I have loved this too. It is kind of funny if you reflect back on our first conversations versus now. We didn't know each other. Right. We were in so different places in our communities, and we would go down to
Exo.
Top of there, they had a loft where there were offices, and we would podcast on your little white
little snowball
white mic.
And we liked the background noise because we were out in public just having a conversation. But then enough people told us that's driving us nuts, and we don't like to hear you chew your food. So the Faith Over Breakfast concept had to change.
Yeah, we listen. We do listen.
Yeah, we do listen.
We change.
So I finished my burrito before we started. Shout out to Paco's for the Mexican omelet burrito.
Yeah, shout out to Paco's, who Pastors Eat reviewed.
There you go.
So you can actually watch Pastor Eric eat the burrito.
Oh, wow, what a treat.
That is a treat.
Wow. Anyway, well, so this episode, we ended up talking about our experience as pastors. We talked about things like encouraging, how to encourage, how to and how not to share criticisms or hard things, how to approach or text your pastor. We talked about what it's like, the complexities, all the different things that pastors are supposed to be good at and how hard that is. If you're not a pastor and if you're listening to this, you probably have one. We might be yours. So you could tune into that and check it out and consider it. And if you're one of our distant listeners, assuming you have a pastor, or I think this applies to any leader, parent, grandparent, we get into that toward the end, just how to, we critique way more thoroughly than we compliment. So maybe that's something we could apply across the board. Anyway.
So email us at faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. Tell us what you think. And ask us questions. We love answering your emails live on air. So, well, not live on air, but in our podcast. So, email us.
Anyway, hope you enjoy it.
Thanks, Andy.
Intro.
Check. Yeah. That would have been that totally would have been the intro. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Eric, hey,
it's good to see you.
It's been a bit. I went out of town. You didn't know. I think I told you. I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So you got an extra hour last week, which is great.
It's good. I had a lot of things to catch up on.
No, I bet. Me too. And the great thing about taking a break is you don't work on things, and then the terrible thing about taking a break is there's still things to do, and you just have to do them later.
Right.
And
they build
other
up.
things.
Yeah, they build up.
So there's that. I did a weird thing where I decided to not ignore my email on this break, and I'm torn on whether that was the right choice. But I didn't want to come back to 500 emails.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I just thought most of them I just clear. But yeah, there was a part of me that wishes I didn't do that, but then it was nice to not come back to 500 emails.
Wow. As a pastor, you get 500 emails, or is that because your business too?
Oh, it's everything. All emails.
All
Yeah.
emails.
Yeah.
Like I get a lot of emails, but about 70% of them are not important.
Yeah. No, same. But they're just there and you have to sift through it.
Yeah, it's true.
But I've got, business, pastor, business association, potentially Resonate, which is tied to being pastor. But there's a lot of emails.
A lot of emails.
And most of them, you just, okay, I'm just being notified, or, they're trying to sell me another Cubs hat.
Right.
Which they succeeded.
Oh, they succeeded.
They
succeeded.
Yeah.
I see. Is this the one that you ordered online, or is
I got totally duped. A sale went up on the spring training hat.
Yeah.
And because I went to one spring training game, which very few people got to do in 2021, I thought, oh, that'd be a cool memento. This is the official spring training hat, and they were selling for $50 and went on sale for $29. I saw, and I went, there, okay, I'm gonna spoil myself. Bought it. This little website, super tricky, has charged me $15 shipping. And it didn't show it on the screen. Like it had to be there, right? But maybe I had to scroll or something. And so I went, 29. Yeah, let's do it. Come on. Just kind of had a little impulse buy moment. Get my bill. Well, guess what I paid for the stinking hat?
About $50.
A little over $50. Stupid.
You're gonna have to wear the hat all the time.
I gotta wear this hat.
$50 out of it.
Yeah, and then it showed up with a thread broken, and I called them, which took forever to get to customer service. I was like, hey, I've got one of the threads is coming off on this hat, and they were like, okay, great, you can return it and we will replace it for you if we have another one. I said, oh, do you have another one? She checked. She's like, no, not in your size. Okay. She said, so, we can refund you, but you have to send it back in the exact same condition, exact same packaging, exact same stickers, which I had already taken off. I just went, forget it. So I'm wearing my $50 flawed hat.
Oh,
yeah.
Your life is just not that good.
My life stinks, man. I've got the worst life. No, that's actually, when you're buying $50 hats, you don't have the worst life.
No, you don't. Maybe we should talk about that.
Living the charmed life.
You're living the charmed life.
And then when you get upset about stupid stuff.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's a first world problem, and you're a first world liver, so you've got first world problems.
Yeah. I know. Anyway, there you go.
Hey, you come back from vacation, the churches are moving back to meeting, and that means our brains are slightly fried. There's a lot of different things going on.
There's been a lot of things, and things have accelerated. There was this pandemic had a different, it was difficult, took a lot of brain power, but in a different direction.
Yeah.
And now we're back to me, it feels like the normal rhythms of life, but with an additional post-pandemic layer.
Yeah. Well, let me throw you a curveball. We didn't really talk about this beginning, but I read an article recently talking about how the stress of a pastor's job. So since you were complaining,
fake news.
Yeah, it was fake news about your Cubs hat. Let me complain a little bit too. This article was very fascinating and it resonated with me. And they were talking about how the thing that's different about a pastor's job compared to anyone else is that pastors actually don't have any downtime mentally. So there's not any work that they do that's just brain dead work. So it requires upper functions in your brain. So you're working on a sermon, which is in some levels academic if you're just thinking about how your brain works. You're doing research, you're laying out a speech, you're preparing that. Then you shift to doing some pre-marriage counseling.
Yep.
Then you shift to overseeing a budget meeting. Then you shift to managing volunteers. Then you shift to delegating things to leadership. Then you shift to mentoring a young, teenager maybe, and then you shift.
And in churches like ours, if the window gets broken, you're going to show up and figure that out.
Right.
And if the toilet's clogged, you're going to,
Yeah. So these are all things that aren't, you sit and you're, filling out an easy form.
Right.
Most of the time, or whatever, there's a lot of downtime built into jobs. It's been a while since I've had other jobs, so trying to think about what the downtime is. But I know there is, and it or at least it doesn't require upper brain function, which stresses pastors out, which is why there's a lot of burnout in pastors. But
yeah, I read something similar, but they were talking about how the role of pastor doesn't fit neatly into categories, and so you get almost every pastor does 2 or 3 things that they're not good at all, because it's this conglomerate of, you're supposed to be a great leader, but you're also supposed to be an empathetic counselor and listener, and those are often 2 very different people.
Right.
And you've got to have these organizational skills, and you've got to, you usually have some kind of hands-on practical, and every version of this is different because every church has different leaders, even yours and mine. I do have shared, other people do carry some of the stuff.
Sure.
And so I don't want to act like that's not true. But there still is this strange dexterity that you're supposed to have, and some pastors are supposed to be everything for the organization. And that not only is your brain always on, but you don't get to operate out of a strength pattern, really. You're often getting into areas that you're just not equipped for, but you are the person, and that's what the expectation is, that you would do X, Y, or Z. So, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is, because I don't think people fully comprehend that.
No, of course not.
Especially if they really
Nor do I
like
comprehend
their
people.
pastor,
Yeah.
in the sense of they don't sort of understand all the dynamics that are happening there.
Yeah, it's a weird, like comedians in cars getting coffee. There's a reason that they always sit down and talk and relate to each other, because nobody gets what it's like to be a comedian, and they just think they just tell jokes all day and ha ha ha, and they don't realize how much work it is and
Sure.
what kind of brain that happens when pastors get together, right?
This is true.
Is we go, oh, okay, yeah, you get the complexities of this, and people in general don't,
Right.
which is
Right. I mean,
not like boo-hoo, poor
Sure.
us, and it's understandable.
it is understandable. I mean, I think the difference is in all of that is I think it's a calling, and that's why
Yeah.
pastors stick to it, even though
Yeah.
it's stressful, is because they feel called to it. It's not something you think, I would like to grow up and have my brain on 24/7.
Oh, sure.
And even when you're spending time with God, yes, there is an element of casting your burdens on God. But even the process of thinking through your burdens to cast on God requires upper brain function.
And you're like, this is just what I do for my job. Like for me to recover is like going to work.
Right.
Yeah.
And so having to try to make those shifts, and I think I'm not I'm not one of those guys who says, as a pastor, I need to have my separate quiet time that's personally, or my separate time with God that's personally for me,
Right.
and then I do my job. It's all so integrated
Yeah.
into who I am and what I do.
I'm kind of that way. I do like some times that are just for me, but I also it's hard for me to like do something like, okay, I'm going to wake up and have this just detached quiet time, and then later I'm going to go study the Bible. They don't seem to separate out like that.
Right. Well, part of it is because you're called to say to people, follow me as I follow Jesus.
Right.
And part of that is your engagement with Jesus on display.
Right.
That's part of it. And that's
Right.
good and bad. And it's,
Yeah.
because sometimes you're not someone people should be following
Yeah. Oh, right.
towards Jesus.
Yeah, because sometimes you're not doing so well, and pastors feel very uncomfortable, and understandably so, saying that to people. Like, I am called to this, but I'm not always doing well.
Right.
I mean, what would you expect? Like, if you're in the church, are you always doing well? Imagine if it was your responsibility to make sure everybody else was doing well, and how unwell you'd be doing having that on top of you. Well, that's us. We're not spiritual gurus. We're not, like another league. But there is a high calling, and God provides a lot of grace.
Yes.
That's important. Yep. And so, but it's not because we're better at it.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think when we put people who are quote unquote better at it up there, that's the worst decisions we make. Those are the guys that do crazy stuff.
Yeah, and I think probably as a pastor, the hard part for me is to not see what's happening as a performance, and as if I do this right, that there's going to be some element of worldly success. Like lots of people are going to come to my church, or I'm going to get recognition from outside of my own community. And because there isn't like a lot of metrics, except for I look at people that are presented to me as sort of the celebrity of
who's
my
doing
world.
well as a pastor, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that even though you're like, no, I can rest in my identity in Christ and what God's called me to, at the same time, the message of the enemy is very enticing in that, like, some of this is my kingdom. I want it to be my kingdom.
Yeah.
And my kingdom needs to proclaim how good I am.
Yeah.
But there's not a matrix to know that you're doing well. It's hard. It's hard to say, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. The matrix you have is Jesus being able to tune your ear to Jesus saying, well done.
Yeah.
I love you. That's the only matrix we have.
Right. Right. Yes. And sometimes that's hard to hear, right? Or it's hard to tune into that voice, especially when people, what did I see? I saw something that somebody shared the other day. Oh yeah, it was Eric Mason. And he said something like, compliments come in, small doses, 2-3 words at a time. Complaints come as essays. Would anyone consider reversing that or something?
Well, I was listening to Kurt Thompson, who's a psychiatrist and Christian, and he was saying, it takes 4 seconds for your nervous system to engage a criticism.
Yeah.
It takes 90 seconds to engage a compliment for it to actually fully like get the benefit.
Yeah.
So you get the essay, and it only takes 4 seconds for that entire essay to sort of consume you and
totally,
and begin to create a terrible space for you.
And the compliment, when somebody says, "Hey, good job today," it never sinks in.
No, you really have, you have to actually stop and say, "Okay, good job, good job." Well, yeah.
And then you
I
go,
got
did
30
I
more
really
seconds.
You're already gone. Get back. Oh yeah.
Which by the way, I think is important, not just with pastors, but anybody that you say, "Hey, I really appreciate that." Yeah, change it into a little bit of an essay. Give it at least 90 seconds of like, here's why.
Yeah.
And let it sit in for that person, because that'll benefit them a lot.
I was thinking about this. So interestingly, just quick mid-podcast pause. This has just reminded me the other day when we couldn't think of the topic we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
It was going to be how to approach your pastor with a concern. I had shared something. Do you remember that now?
Yes, now.
Yeah. Okay, and we forgot it. So I guess
the
here
Holy
we are.
Spirit was like,
he's like, that was good, just not then. So here we are. So I was going through some of my stuff in my office. I had one of these rare, I think something was canceled,
okay,
but I had another thing in an hour, and I thought, you know what? There's a couple little files and boxes that I've never looked through since I moved my office. So I was flipping through some, and there's this box of stuff I kept from my youth ministry days, and in it were probably 10 to 15 notes that people had given me, mostly kids. And, sometimes it was just a funny drawing and, like you're my favorite person. Thanks for talking to me. And it took me back right when I would remember how they gave it to me. I would remember everything. And I stuck some of them up on my bookshelf even now, cause I thought, my, oh my, I need this. Interestingly, the community that did the best job at affirming me was middle school children.
which is saying a lot.
Of all, that was like a church. There, I had 80, 90 of them.
That's impressive.
Like there was a small church of middle school students, the church community that has done the best job of giving me. Now, I've gotten affirmations at our church. I'm by no means saying that hasn't happened. I'm just saying I got more from that community, and I was there less time than I've been at my church. Now, but I also do have some from our church, and sometimes one guy took the time to do this whole drawing of me breaking the communion bread, and it was really like cool and fun, and I love that. It's up on I just smile every time I see it. And I think he sat there for an hour or two and drew this thing, and inside, wrote me a little note. And I have a sermon, somebody, I think I know who, but not positive, but they outlined my sermon on the back of one of our welcome cards and did all this little artistic stuff. And it's one of my bookmarks, and it just says, "Great job, Andy. Great sermon." And that bookmark, I cling to that. Like, I look to it, and it's cool how they drew it out, but it also just, the fact that, here's what it said to me. I paid attention the whole time to what you said. I thought it was good, and I wanted you to have this cool thing I drew about it, And those things are so rare. They really are. And so when they come, I'm like collecting them. And then I realized I have long notes from these middle school kids, and that's beautiful. I thought, man, we as adults, and this isn't a criticism to my church. I'm not writing these kind of notes to people, right? I'm saying we as adults forget how to do that and how much it matters. And I don't know what it was about those kids. I don't know if their parents told them to do it, or if some of them it just was an overflow. If they had some time and they were being creative, I don't know. How about you? Do you have anything like that? I mean, I'm just saying, I'm like starved for that. Just to be honest, like I'm not. It's not because nobody does it. I can name people who have specifically gone out of their way, and thank you, because normally you hear the complaints, and they're long, long.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, to say that I've never had complaints would be wrong, because I have, and I've dealt with lots of those. They're different than I thought they were going to be.
Yeah.
I thought people were going to complain about like my preaching,
sure,
or they were going to complain about, how certain things are done in the sense of like structurally.
Yeah.
But that for the most part hasn't been that. The complaints have been more around how things, spiritually, choices that have been made by the church or by me.
Yeah.
That the complaints come, or people feel hurt or offended by something I've said or
Same
done.
Here. Usually, yeah.
Yeah. So that's,
nobody's ever been like, that sermon just wasn't great.
Yeah.
And written that up. It's usually this is destructive, abuse of the position or something.
Right. Yeah. So I think in my community, I think, and they are good at caring for me, but they're not and for Rod and for Mark, they're not necessarily an extremely verbal church. So they're more action-oriented church. So I can tell that they're listening to what I say and they're doing the things that I'm ensuring, but they aren't verbal. So what's been interesting is, as we've had actually an increase of maybe older people in our community, they are verbal. They're used to telling the pastor.
Yeah, good job.
We really appreciate that. So I'll just give an example. I was sitting with some guys after church this Sunday, and we're doing a documentary of our church because 20 years.
Wow.
It'll be 20 years in October since we planted.
Wow.
So that's a big deal to have a church for 20 years. So we're going to try to do this documentary, and part of the documentary is, for a couple Sundays, we're setting up a camera and a backdrop and everything, and we're going to have as many villagers come in and answer a couple questions about, when did they come, and et cetera, et cetera. So they were talking about this around the table, and so some of them have come out of some, interesting churches, and they made their way through Calvary Chapel to the village. And so they're talking about how much they do like Robert Furrow and stuff like that, and just the experience of different churches. Yeah. And I cracked the joke. I was like, yeah, but you ended up here because I'm so much better than Robert Furrow, right? And I was kind of being silly. And one of them was like, no. No. They said, no, you really are. And I was like, oh, wow. Oh. Say it again. Yeah, it felt really good. And then one of the older guys was like, he laughed. He said, you are really good. Robert Furrow, you. but it was affirming that, like, yeah, you have something really good to offer here. And I think that's what I really long for. And I think when I talk to pastors, that's what they long for, is just not for the whole church to just be static, and you're a celebrity and yay, sign my Bible. But more just, no, what you have to offer is really good and important. And I need to verbally affirm that every so often to let you know, no, this is good. Because sometimes you're sitting there when you're preaching and you're looking at people and you're wondering what they're thinking and how they're responding based on their body language, especially in a smaller church, as you well know.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
And then
just hyper aware.
I've
said this to people. I would rather, as far as comfort level goes, speak to 5,000 people and walk through the crowd, because it all just sort of blends together. In a smaller church setting, God put me in a very uncomfortable place. I hear everybody when they're whispering to each other. I see when they're not paying attention. I notice when they walk out. It's and you're like, oh, is this a bathroom break, or are you just done? You're
done with this.
And that's very distracting to me. Which it just is what it is. It's just the type of venue
and the type of church you're creating,
and that I even believe in. Right?
Yes, yeah.
But it is very uncomfortable, and I'm hyper aware of it all.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think there's that, like, I want that affirmation. I want people to say, hey, no, you're doing a good job, because it's not just the preaching part. It's when you sit with people and you're in their intimate parts of their life, and you think, man, I'm in a very privileged spot here.
Right. It is.
But I don't know, like, we're talking about life change is going to require a lot of work from you.
Yeah.
And a lot of consistency from me. And so you're not getting a lot of, like, in counseling, people aren't like, good job, Eric. Like, I really feel lifted up, and now my marriage or whatever I was wrestling with, wow, yeah, this is better.
I joked with somebody who came to my office the other day. I said, well, nobody asked to come here because they're doing well and they just want to talk. So what's going on?
Which, I have had a few meetings like that. And those are awesome. And so if you want to really encourage pastors, call them up when you're doing really well and say, can I take you out for coffee, tell you what God is doing in my life, in this community?
I had, just yesterday, somebody took me out just to check in on me, knowing that we've had some hard things, which is also really great. And I'm so grateful for that. I really don't want to complain. People, I receive affirmations. Please, everybody, don't. If you write Eric and I these like 10-page letters tomorrow, we're gonna.
Do. I know.
You're fine with that.
Yeah,
I'm saying, wait.
Send me the 10-page paper.
Wait a minute till we forget we did this podcast. That'll only take 2 weeks. We'll forget we did this podcast in 2 weeks, because we're not. I'm not like saying that that's what I'm asking for. I'm just saying that there are people who do a great job, but somehow the complaints come in strong, and they're usually very long and complex. They're often followed with awkwardness of some form and difficult something, and they eat at your soul. And so the compliments and the help and the affirmation, and especially, I would love to hear the stories, of what God has done. And I am encouraged too, in the nonverbal moments where you see them put into practice something you've taught them to do. That is hugely rewarding.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would mean a lot if the affirmations balanced out some of those critiques. And then with the critiques, so I read an article by Russell Moore, and he was referencing.
You referenced Russell Moore a lot. I
know.
You like Mr. Moore?
I like him. Did you hear he's leaving the Southern Baptist?
Yes, I did.
Post, yeah. I think that is
probably most people have no idea who we're talking about, but check him out.
Russell Moore's the head of ethics and civil liberties or probably still is at the moment, of the Southern Baptist Convention, and he really took a beating the last 4-6 years because he wasn't a Trump guy, and as an ethics, civil liberties person, he had to speak on these things repeatedly, and a lot of his denomination just railed him for a long time.
Well, which they're bleeding people right now.
They are bleeding people.
A lot of different areas. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of it has to do with these same issues. But I came to really respect him over this period because he continued to consistently speak lovingly and highly of his brothers and sisters in Christ who were tearing him to shreds. And he was consistently, like, the things that he was promoting and warning against, I feel like he just stayed right down the line on what he didn't waver. And I want to be more like that, honestly. So that I've come to pay more attention to him after having watched him do that. So he's moving over to Christianity Today, the magazine. So anyway, he wrote something on this topic about kind of how to approach your pastor with criticisms. And he brought up that what people tend to do is just hit you out of the blue with something. And that's not really a way that anybody likes to receive a big, heavy critique, is here it is out of the blue, or it'll be a text, And he gave an example, and he was referencing somebody else who'd written a little article about it, I think. But he said, please don't do this. Hey, can we talk about something in a text, right? Because you and I know when you get that text, the flags go up and you have no idea where this is headed, but
right.
you assume, we're going down the rabbit hole. Like that's what that usually means. Hey, you got time? Oh, great. Either your life's blown up or you're coming after me, right?
Right.
And that's unfortunate. It's just happened so many times.
Right.
And so he was saying, here's what you do. You reach out and say, hey, I have a concern that I'd like to talk to you about. Don't worry, nothing big, just, something that's been on my heart for a couple months. I'd love to make an appointment. Do you have time? Now you've framed it so your pastor, and this is probably just good etiquette with anybody, they know what this is. Or if you say, hey, I've just been feeling really spiritually dry. I could really use some encouragement. Do you have time? Great. I know what that is. Or, I'm having a relational problem. I could really use some advice. Great. I know what that is.
Yeah. Give some clear ideas of what you want to talk about.
Clear ideas
is helpful. Yes.
Because when it's just, and then the worst is when you act like you're having somebody, you want to hang out. Hey, what do you want to hang out? You want to do something together? Would you like to come over for dinner? And then it turns out that it was a bait and switch. And it's not come over for dinner. It's we're going to talk to you about this big thing that we've been saving up for you. And that happens, and that is the absolute worst approach. Because it not only catches off guard, but it hurts because it felt like friendship, and then you brought out a knife or a big, heavy sack of pain. Right. And when it felt like you were trying to hang out. Yeah. And pastors are people, we want to have friendship. And so when you offer hang out and it turns out it's not that, it's just emotionally just absolutely painful.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, no, that's all really good advice. I think while you were talking with two things I thought about. One is I think as a community, we forget that the pastor is just one of the sheep. He just happens to be a sheep who's been called to lead the other sheep by saying the shepherd's going this way. Right.
The pastor to the great shepherd is also a sheep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's as dumb as you.
Totally. Right? Oh, gosh, yeah.
We're all wandering around.
I can think of plenty of people in our church who are, I am dumber than.
Yes, exactly.
Did you hear that sentence? That proved it.
That was good. So we're getting stuck off the side of the cliff as much as everybody else is, trying to. So there's that's one thing.
Which is why, by the way, little weird side note, why the denominational circles we're in believe in pastors being part of a church-like community themselves is because they are sheep under Christ. So that's why there's groups of elders and classis and presbyteries and stuff is because there you're just a sheep, which is what you are. Yeah.
And so the other thing I thought about is I remember hearing a pastor say that the elders of your church and the church itself is only going to believe from 75 to 50% in the mission. Like they're going to be that passionate compared to you. So you're 100% into this mission and it's going to be 75 and 50. So they're not, so you can't expect them to be there.
Right.
But you have to also realize if you're in the community and you're leading with the pastor, 9 times out of 10, he's 100% in on the vision and he's pouring his life in and he's wondering why not everyone is online with him. And that can become very discouraging if he doesn't get in his head that, people have, their own lives and their own ways, and they have their own relationship to the vision.
Yeah, and that is hard. I've definitely dealt with that.
So encouraging him by saying, hey, we love that you're 100% into this vision, and we're going to support that and be there with you. And is really good. Just reminding your pastor. Because because
it often feels like, do these people care about this vision? I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's sounding stark, but it can feel.
But there's a lot of internal self-doubt.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Is this really a good idea? Should we even be doing this? Like,
have I articulated any of this clearly? Has anyone heard me over the past 6, 7, 15, 20 years?
Right. And 9 times out of 10, we're not blaming you. We're blaming us.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
We're saying, I didn't do it right. I didn't communicate. I wasn't present at the right times. I have failed.
If I could clear something up, if you think that your pastor, this isn't just us, but if you think your pastor probably doesn't have a clue about the potential negative, and downsides to his life and ministry, and you think you really need to say something because he has no idea, chances are it plagues him every day.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of pastors.
Yeah, and you also don't want to go around always just kind of moping about how it plagues you every day. And you feel like in some church contexts, you can't tell anybody that it plagues you every day. You have to act confident. So just the fact that it doesn't come across that way doesn't mean it's not the case.
Yeah. So, I think here we are. You get a little insight into pastors, maybe a little bit of our frustration, a little bit of what we long for. In just being cared for. The interesting thing in small church pastors,
which is a whole other animal.
It's a whole, and that's us at some level, is that there's no performance reviews. Like my wife has these huge performance reviews that she has to fill out and then go over with her supervisor.
Yeah.
And they have to and she has to have all of these goals that are highly articulated for next year, and those goals are going to be assessed the next year. And so that's not our job. Like and so in some ways we end up looking at our congregation.
They are the performance review. If they're saying good job, and if they're moving in the direction, if we don't hear that or see that, it feels like you messed, you didn't do a good job.
Well, yeah. Some of it's like, giving's down. I'm not performing well. That person glared at me when they walked by and didn't even say hi. Oh, okay, I'm not doing well.
Right.
The person I've been meeting with doesn't seem to want to meet anymore, but they haven't said anything to me.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I've been saying the same thing for the last 3 sermons, but nobody seems to be hearing this. Those are the performance reviews. And not to say that you need to fix all that, but at least understand that is the assessment of how we're understanding ourselves.
Yeah. I feel like, absolutely. I feel like I want to say that this probably just applies to I think husbands and wives feel these things, right?
Sure.
How often does my wife hear me sit down and in long form just tell her what an awesome job she's doing, right? Which, by the way, happy anniversary, Michaela. That's
happy
our anniversary today.
Oh, how many years?
9 years.
9 years.
Yeah. Cruising toward the big 1-0.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah. And
it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And huge deal for us. And so, that's anyway, but how often do our spouses hear us long form? You get the, hey, I don't know if you should have talked to the kids that way, but how often is it just, you do a great job.
Yeah.
And I need to thank my wife for having even recently done that a couple times and just taken a moment, and it means a ton. And so, but just to our listeners, to those of us, it's not just how you approach pastors. It's probably every important person in your life, your parents, right? How often do your parents, how often have they heard the ways that they failed you? How often have you sat down in long form, just told them what a gift and how you wouldn't have come to Jesus, and or even that you really hurt me, but then again, you really gave me a gift and I want to thank you for that too. And yeah, there's probably just something in here of we probably need to express way more gratitude.
Right.
And-
Well, if our response to the gospel is gratitude, then all the good gifts that have been given to us are from the gospel. They come from Christ.
Yep.
They come from from God, the creator of all things. So,
and you can give to others what has been given to you.
yeah.
So you can show gratitude not just to Christ, but to other people.
Well, in some ways, that is how we show gratitude
to
Christ, is by celebrating the goodness in people.
You have to figure if you've given a cup of cold water to someone who is thirsty and you've given it to Jesus, then wouldn't it be true that if you express gratitude to someone, that also could be a way of expressing gratitude to Jesus? And that if you don't express gratitude and thankfulness to people, that you may not be simultaneously doing that to, for Jesus, that would be a real vehicle of worship in an interesting way, if you could see it as such.
So, yeah.
All right.
I think this has been an interesting podcast, and I'm hoping that you've waded your way through it to get here. Because I think you hopefully heard a little bit of our heart, and if you heard a little edge here and there, you also saw some of the way we just are hurt or get angry or
it happens.
Get frustrated with things, and we're humans.
This is true. Well, Eric, I should say at this point, we've been talking for many years and doing this podcast together, and back when we first started, we hardly knew each other.
That's true.
I really like talking to you.
I like talking to you.
You're great. I would go to your church, man.
Well,
if I wasn't doing another church, I would go to your church, because you're a deep, thoughtful person who offers a lot, always invites me to think deeper, invites me to know Jesus more. Though I do not always agree with you, it doesn't matter much, because of how much I trust you and how much I enjoy, just working together with you. So there you go. For what it's worth, I feel like I want to tell you that. So
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Wow.
There you go.
That's cool.
So now on that intimate moment, now that as Eric needs 30, he's going.
I need 90 seconds.
30 more seconds, 60 more seconds. Keep it going.
Keep it going. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.